Kam Nelson made history by landing 2 triple backs in 1 floor routine. Winter Cup spots have been awarded, and Yul Moldauer has been suspended from competition till 2026. For those new here, I'm Kensley, the host of Neutral Deductions, a podcast all about men's gymnastics. This is episode 55, where I recap weeks 1 and 2 of the NCAA season, plus gymternet news.
This is the Neutral Deductions podcast, men's gymnastic news, coverage, and analysis.
So the major news of last week was that Olympian and 2-time world bronze medalist Yul Moldauer has been suspended by USADA, or the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, for missing 3 whereabouts notifications. His original post mentioned that he would twice miss the test while at competitions where he was also being drug tested. He passed the drug test at those competitions, but simply wasn't where he said he was going to be for the USADA test. So what does that mean practically? Well, it means that Moldauer, in all probability, listed his gym in Colorado as his location because he could normally be there within the specified time limits for a USADA drug test. But he forgot to update that he would be competing in, let's say, maybe France or Germany. And so even though he was being drug tested internationally, he missed the drug test back in the US. And so then after those 2 missed drug tests due to being at other competitions, the 3rd drug test that he missed was after Olympic trials. So in the post that he made on Instagram, he wrote, "During that time, while I took a short break to reset mentally and physically, while I was in Florida, I was in the area, but not at the exact location I had listed when a tester arrived. And when I got in contact with the test officer, I was 45 minutes away, and I told him I was in the car and ready to drive and meet him, but he said he only had 15 minutes to wait, which resulted in my 3rd missed test. This experience has been incredibly difficult, but it has also given me the chance to reflect, grow, and come back stronger. I am now in a better mental and physical place and more determined than ever to continue pursuing my goals. So you will be able to compete again in January of 2026. All of last weekend actually was full of a lot of really shocking news. So what came out the day after Yul Moldauer's announcement was that Donnell Wittenberg, who is also a 2-time world bronze medalist, he announced that he was going to be moving to Evo Gymnastics in Florida. And Evo is under the direction of Psych Caesar and Kevin Majika. And if you missed our interview last week with Psych Caesar, I highly recommend going back and listening to it. He had a lot of insight into what it was like taking athletes to the Olympic Games and how Evo is funding and moving forward. So this move is actually really interesting to me. Donnell has previously been at Salto Gymnastics under Anthony Ingrelli, who we mentioned a few weeks back. He was the gymnastics coach who was suffering from seizures, and we linked his GoFundMe, which I think is still available, and you are able to donate if you are willing and want to help support him in that journey. So I think that this move will be potentially really good for Donnell. At Salto Gymnastics, he was one of the only elites and at times the only elite in his gym. And now he's going to be training at Evo, where they have signed a big team with Shane Wiskus and Brody Malone and several others. So I hope that that move will be really profitable to him and his goals ahead of a home Olympics in LA 2028. The other big news that we got the same day that Donnell was moving to Evo was that Ilya Kovtun, who is the Olympic parallel bar silver medalist, is applying with his coach Irina for Croatian citizenship with the intent to compete for Croatia. Now, this is really interesting because he has been living and competing in Croatia for the time being while of course, there is war going on in his country. And the head of the men's program in Ukraine stated that they will not release Kovtun to compete with Croatia. So if that is true, he will actually need to sit out of competition for a year before he would be able to compete for Ukraine. Now, today we got news that Christian Ballas of Hungary has announced his retirement, and per the Hungarian Gymnastics Federation, he is retiring based on medical advice. This is a medical problem not diagnosed or related to gymnastics. It's a separate medical condition, and it was advised to him that he should not be competing, and so he has hung up his grips and retired. Moving on to U.S. NCAA and elite news, 3 of the Winter Cup qualifiers have already taken place, and there have been some really weird issues at each of them. So the first one was West Point Open. And the scoring system at West Point Open was initially showing a 4-up, 3-count score format for the competition instead of the regular 4-up, 4-count scores. And that is until the entire scoring system went up in flames after the 4th rotation and no one knew what was happening. It was reported to me that athletes were sitting on the floor for like an hour after the meet, watching football on their phones, waiting for scores to be tallied. And in the end, after all of that went down, Ohio State's Drake Andrews and Kam Nelson qualified for Winter Cup. Speaking of Kam Nelson, he performed the first known floor routine with 2 triple backs in it. The first being the Nagorny, named after Olympic champion Nikita Nagorny, and the second being a Lukin, named after Olympic champion Valery Lukin. And never in my life did I think I would see a routine like that. If you haven't seen it, definitely go to his Instagram page and check it out. It is spectacular. So this past weekend, there were 2 more Winter Cup qualifiers, Windy City Invitational and Rocky Mountain Open. So Windy City Invitational had no official live stream, and I cannot believe in the year of our Lord, 2025, that there are allowed to be qualifiers to the event where the U.S. national team is going to be selected and there is no official stream with commentators. Like, why are coaches having to ask fans if more people will watch on Facebook or Instagram because they're going to be streaming it from their own platform? It's really not a good look. And I would love to see some sort of stipulation that if you are going to be selected as a Winter Cup qualifier, you have to provide an official stream with commentators. Like, there are plenty of options out there now with Birdius and other options. And we don't need to be having teams stream individually on Instagram anymore. So this was one separate issue, and this was before the meet actually took place. And allegedly, athletes at Windy City were having to dodge a crack on high bar. So just some wild set of circumstances again for the second Winter Cup qualifier. But in the end, in terms of the actual gymnastics that happened, Illinois took the win over Michigan, and they also won 4 of the 6 event titles plus the all-around. So Michigan kind of started out in a hole and ended up making a really big push in the last third of the meet, specifically on parallel bars and high bar, but ultimately it just wasn't enough. So even though it wasn't enough for the Wolverines, there were still some highlights. So Logan McCowan and Robert Nold took the parallel bar and high bar titles respectively. And then Minnesota transfer Charlie Larson finally made his long-awaited debut, and he placed second on floor, so he will actually be able to send a petition as an event specialist to Winter Cup. There was an injury, unfortunately, so sadly Landon Blixt suffered an injury, and the extent of his injury is unknown, but we are certainly wishing him well in recovery. I would say overall the star of the meet was certainly Nebraska transfer Sam Phillips. So Phillips won the all-around and the still rings title, and then he earned an automatic berth to compete at Winter Cup alongside Oklahoma commit Sasha Bogonosiuk. Okay, now on to the Rocky Mountain Open. So I was actually there in person, and it's one of my favorite meets of the year. It was sold out, and there were so many passionate fans there. I will tell you, one of the funniest things of this meet was watching athletes and coaches cheer for these scales like it was an athlete prepping to do a triple back on floor. I mean, they are like sweating over these scales. Like, they are hyping each other up. Like, you got this. You can stand on one leg. I believe in you. And like, genuinely, I had to work really hard to not show reactions based on these cheers because I thought it was so funny. Like scales are, I mean, like, I understand balancing, not ideal, but like, it's not that hard. And the way that some of these people were acting was like, again, that you were getting ready to go do a triple back on floor. So just really highly amusing. I will say the other really lovely thing that came from this meet was Yul Moldauer and Vitaly Guimarães, who are Oklahoma grads. They were in the crowd, and they were responsible for so many of the crowd cheers. Like, you could definitely hear them throughout the arena. But despite their cheers and best efforts, Stanford did have the edge over Oklahoma, even though it was a really close battle. So these two powerhouses traded the lead over the course of the meet, with OU leading in the 5th round. And in the end, Stanford's strong performance on rings ended up clinching the title in the final rotation. So overall, the meet was just one for the history book. So Air Force Eric Upton claimed the program's first Rocky Mountain Open all-around titles since the open-ended scoring system. And Patty Hoops claimed the program's first Rocky Mountain Open pommel horse title since 2011. So that was really cool. Nebraska put up several strong performances to finish 3rd. So Chase Mondy, he is one you have got to watch. And I visited Nebraska in the fall, and I asked their coaches, I was like, who do I need to watch? And they were like, Chase Mondy, Chase Mondy, Chase Mondy. He is worth the hype, you guys. Just really spectacular. One to watch for that national floor title, certainly. He ended up tying for the floor win with Brigham Frithway from OU. Again, a really stunning performance. I had kind of come into this meet thinking Emery Dodonley might take the title, but it was Chase Mondy and Brigham Frithway who ended up taking that win. And then Cornhusker Taylor Christopoulos took the high bar title with a 14.1, and he had the highest score in the nation this week and was tied for that role. So Simpson was the 5th team at Rocky Mountain Open, and while they were kind of far off the lead of the other 4 teams, they did improve their score almost 4 points since last week, and I think that that's something to be really proud of. So in terms of Winter Cup qualifying, Eric Upton automatically earned his berth to Winter Cup. And then here's where things get really interesting. Stanford commit June Iwa and Nebraska gymnast Alex Natashe tied for 2nd. Now, the Winter Cup procedures do not currently have a tiebreak procedure. I've checked it like 5 times. So it's unclear if they're both going to qualify. And this situation just drives me like absolutely up a wall. Like, why are coaches and athletes and judges and media people all like sitting in a circle trying to figure out which athlete is going to qualify between June and Alex? Like, why is this a thing? Like, why is there not tiebreak procedures listed in the qualifying procedures for this event? Like, Lili Leung, the president of USA Gymnastics, has specifically addressed to the media this problem before of why the men's documents don't ever have tiebreak procedures. And it's a really big problem. And I understand, like, maybe somewhere in the lore and like the rule book somewhere, and there's an overarching rule that the men's program is always going to use an FIG tiebreak procedures, or they may say we're never going to break ties. But like, we shouldn't have to be searching for this like pirates searching for freaking lost treasure. Like, so this is my appeal to the people writing these documents. Please, for the love of God, do the athletes and coaches a solid and put the dang tiebreak procedures in the actual qualification documents. It's the kind thing and the right thing to do. And also, if you aren't going to break ties, like, say that too. Like, this is not just going to apply to June and Alex. And if a tiebreak is applied, I believe that June gets that on having the higher E score. But there are some other situations, like at Windy City, where some of those athletes a little bit farther down the all-around list are also tied. And so there's a rule for qualifying for Winter Cup that after the top 2 automatic berths are given, they will take the next 3 highest all-around scores. Okay, well, what if there are ties there? Like, are they breaking them? Are they not? And so you have some people in the men's program saying, like, yes, we're going to break the ties. But I'm like, why isn't it in the actual like rule qualification sheet that's posted on the website? So again, do the athletes a solid, do the media a solid. Like, we shouldn't be leaving there wondering who got the spot. Like, we can't cover the sport effectively if the rules aren't written super well. So again, please, please, please add in tiebreak procedures, or say we aren't going to break ties. And yeah, that would just be best. So moving on to some of the other meets this past weekend. Stanford actually competed twice. So they competed at Rocky Mountain Open, which I was at, and then they also competed at Cal Benefit Cup on Monday. They were really, really dominant at Cal Benefit Cup, and there's not a whole lot more to say than that. They fielded both Colt Walker and Taylor Burkhart in the all-around, who tied with an 80.4 first place. So not only did they win the meet, but they also fielded the highest all-around score in the nation for week 2 of scores. Stanford also took 5 of the 6 event titles, with Aiden Lee taking Cal's lone event title on pommel horse. Ohio State beat Greenville at home and swept all of the event titles in the process. Caden Spencer's high bar routine was certainly the highlight of the meet for me, dismounting with a stick. He tied Nebraska's Taylor Christopoulos for the highest score of the event for week 2. Neither team fielded an athlete in the all-around, and while Greenville suffered their second loss in 2 weeks, they did improve their team total, which again, I think is something to be really proud of as a team, a relatively young team. Now, moving on to Penn State and Army. Penn State handedly beat Army by over 10 points in their home opener, and they did so without their head coach, Randy Jepson, who missed out due to health reasons. And Randy has sort of been missing from the picture, and it's unclear what all is going on with him, but we certainly wish him well and wish him good health as he recovers. So Army actually started this meet in the lead, but Penn State was able to rally from behind, and Army won 2 of the event titles, with Joseph Busselmeyer taking floor and Maddox Pabellon taking pommel horse. So the rest of the titles belong to Penn State athletes, and transfer athlete Kellen Ryan was selected as the most outstanding athlete of the meet. And neither team ended up sending anyone to do all around. Now, for the final meet of this week, William & Mary edged Springfield for the win at Navy Open, where the home team finished 3rd. So this was actually a really, really big win for William & Mary, because it's the first time that they have beaten Navy since 2018. So the Tribe also took a quartet of event titles, including Gavin Zabrowski on rings, Connor Barrow on vault, Evan Wilkins on parallel bar, and Ricky Pizum on high bar. Now, Brian Solomon was the sole victor for the midshipmen. He took both the floor and the all-around titles. And then Springfield also took home a pair of individual event titles, with Devin Felsenstein taking the pommel horse title outright and William Wilson tying Zabrowski for the rings title. Now, moving back to last week, I did have the pleasure of covering my second Beach Blast meet in Galveston, Texas. And truly, I cannot tell you how well run this meet is. It's super fun. It's themed. They had a slew of really good judges, and they asked the judges to dress up in like Hawaiian attire, and they have them bring fun things for, a flag if someone gets a stick or, is raising their hand. And like one person brought a ukulele, which I thought was really, really clever. So they feed all of the staff and volunteers like super delicious food. It's just a really good time for everyone there. And I'll tell you a couple of the highlights for me. So one was during the level 8 boys. So everyone was sort of like looking and gathering around this one kid, like, who is that? And as it turns out, it was David Horton, son of none other than Olympic medalist Jonathan Horton. Truly, this kid is something special and one to watch coming up in the next few years. Ian Gunther was also there at this meet doing awards and just some general promo stuff, and the kids adore him. It was so interesting to see how many people came to this meet just to meet him. And I've been saying this for the past few years, and I really wish that USAG would capitalize on men in the community who have these huge followings on social media. Give Ian a code like Ian10 and let him earn 10% of the profits for increasing ticket sales. Anyone who uses this code, he gets 10% of those profits. Or someone like Stacey Irvin, who's a Michigan alum who has over 1 million followers on Instagram. There are definitely people in the community who I think could help build the crowds at these men's meet, and I think that they should be paid and incentivized to do so. So that's just my bug in USAG's ear. Let some of the men in the community help build the spectators to watch these amazing athletes. The final thing that I will tell you from Beach Blast is that I met a couple of judges who are working on a judging memoir telling all of the stories that they know. And y'all, these stories are gold. you are going to want to pre-order this book in a heartbeat. I think it's probably still a couple of years away, but truly, like, this is what Gym Nerd dreams are made of. And I certainly cannot wait to read all of them. Now, looking forward to this weekend, there are a couple of big meets I want to talk about. One is the final Winter Cup qualifier at Stanford Open. And then the other big meet coming up is Illinois at Oklahoma. And we are so lucky that both of these meets are going to be broadcasted with commentators. So make sure you tune into both of those. Now, if you would, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast. It helps others find Neutral Deductions and learn more about men's gymnastics. If you would like to help bring more live men's gymnastics coverage, please consider donating. A massive thank you to Jeffrey for sending in $200. With that money, we are now buying the new DJI microphones to take to meet so we can have better quality audio from the athletes. So we are almost entirely listener supported at this point. So these donations really do make a difference in producing a better quality of product for you. The PayPal link is in every show note and at the bottom of every article on neutraldeductions.com. And you can also donate via Stripe as well. If you have any questions, comments, or insider tips, you can email us at neutraldeductions@gmail.com. That's all for this week. We'll see you next time.